Please buy our puppy, the little girl whispered, not knowing he was the CEO who'd fired her mom. It was just past 5 o'clock on a blustery Thursday afternoon when Ethan Brooks, CEO of a fast-rising logistics firm in Chicago, stepped out of his black SUV and into the metallic chill of early winter. His wool coat flapped in the wind, his breath visible in bursts. He adjusted the collar and gripped his phone tightly, scrolling through emails filled with budget cuts, downsizing plans, and an urgent meeting with the board the next morning. This was the cost of the corner office. Constant pressure, relentless numbers, and very little space to feel. As he approached the revolving glass doors of his building, a voice stopped him cold. "Please, would you buy our puppy?" It wasn't loud, it wasn't begging, but it cut, so soft, so sincere. He turned. There, standing on the sidewalk just beneath the flickering glow of a bus stop lamp, was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Her coat was worn clearly once bubblegum colored, but now faded and too small at the sleeves. She had big hazel eyes and a determination in her stance that seemed far older than her years. In her arms was a tiny golden retriever puppy wrapped in a scarf. Next to her was a cardboard sign barely propped against the base of the lamppost. The hand-painted letters read, "For sale our puppy. Please help." Ethan hesitated. He didn't do this, didn't engage with street kids or personal causes. Not because he didn't care, but because caring had consequences, and he was already stretched to his emotional brink. But something about her eyes made him stop. She stepped forward a little, lifting the puppy toward him. "His name is Waffles," she said quietly. "Mom said if we sell him, we can buy her medicine and food." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. No tears ran down her cheeks. She wasn't playing the part of the poor child in need. She was simply telling the truth, as if she'd practiced it and now had no choice but to live it. The wind tugged again at his coat, but he didn't move. Finally, reaching into his wallet, he pulled out a crisp $100 bill and extended it toward her. But the girl shook her head. "No money unless you take Waffles too. That's the deal." Something cracked inside him. He knelt slowly, not wanting to scare her. The puppy sniffed at his hand, then nestled into the warmth of his jacket, as if sensing the change in energy. Ethan carefully cradled him, feeling the tiny creature's heart race beneath soft fur. He looked back up at the girl. She held out a piece of cardboard ripped from the edge of her sign. Scribbled in pen were the words, "By signing here, you promise to take care of Waffles." He blinked, stunned. She even had a pen. He signed, hands slightly shaking. And just then, headlights swept across the sidewalk. A woman's voice echoed from a few yards away. "Leela." The girl turned. A woman in her early 30s, pale and thin beneath a heavy coat, hurried over. Her face was tired, her eyes cautious, but there was a fierce urgency in the way she held her arms open for the child. She embraced Lila tightly, then looked at Ethan and the puppy in his coat. She stared for a moment, then offered a small nod. "Thank you," she said, her voice low. "She loves that dog. More than anything." Then added almost as an afterthought, "I'll come back for him. When I can." She didn't say her name, didn't ask for his, just took Lila's hand and walked away into the darkness, her silhouette shrinking into the evening fog. Ethan stood there holding Waffles in a torn signature slip. The city buzzed around him indifferent, but something had shifted. Inside him, irrevocably, he had walked out of his car thinking about profit margins. But now, all he could think about was a little girl in a pink coat and a mother who promised to come back for what she loved. And the weight of a puppy who now carried a quiet burden named hope. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Waffles had curled up in a makeshift bed of blankets beside the fireplace in Ethan's loft apartment, safe, warm, and already snoring softly. But Ethan's mind kept circling that moment on the street. The girl's eyes, her voice, the way she had held out that piece of cardboard, like a contract written in trust. He rubbed at his temples and poured himself a glass of water, pacing to the window. Chicago glowed beneath him, neon and steel snow and silence. And then he remembered something. A small, barely visible patch stitched onto the sleeve of Lila's coat. It had looked familiar. He opened his laptop, pulled up an old company initiative folder. One of the many programs that had been scrapped during the last cost-cutting cycle. There it was, Rise Together, a corporate-sponsored outreach program that provided winter clothing and family support to low-income employees. The same program that Cope must have come from, He had approved its shutdown 6 months ago. On paper, it was a minor expense, a feel-good initiative with minimal ROI. At the time, it had been an easy cut. But now, it had a face, a voice, a child holding a puppy in the cold. He clicked through the files, unease mounting. The program had been created under the previous CEO and widely praised by employees, especially single parents in the company. It was never supposed to be permanent, but it had mattered. To people like Lila, he closed his laptop only for it to ding a moment later. An email. Subject line: Preliminary layoff round 2, final sign-off. Attached was a spreadsheet, names, departments, reasons. One stood out: Diana Hale, Customer Experience Specialist, terminated 3 weeks ago. The same time frame Lila mentioned when she said Mom said if we sell him, we can buy medicine. Ethan froze. He clicked into the HR records. Diana Hale, age 33, Department Customer Support, terminated due to a flag system failure during a high-traffic weekend. Recommendation: lack of escalation. Protocol adherence. Final signatory: Ethan Brooks. His signature, his decision. He stared at the screen. He vaguely remembered the meeting. Charts, loss projections, a presentation by his head of operations. There had been no pushback. Diana had no written complaints, no defenders in the room. She had simply disappeared from the system. But now her daughter had walked into his world with a puppy and a cardboard plea. He clicked into the customer satisfaction dashboard, narrowed the range to the 2 weeks following Diana's termination. A bright red drop stared back. A decrease of nearly 12% in customer satisfaction. That wasn't a blip. That was a scream. Was it all connected? Ethan dug deeper, into archived feedback forms. Comment after comment rolled in, many of them, older but glowing. Diana is the only rep who stayed with me for over an hour when my kid was in the ER. Please recognize Diana. She helped fix something 3 other people couldn't. She's why I stayed with this company. He leaned back, breath caught in his throat. None of this had been in the termination notes. Just numbers. Just cost. He opened another folder. A scanned copy of her employee photo appeared. Tired eyes, soft smile. And suddenly there was no distance left between him and the people behind the spreadsheets. He remembered the mother's words. I'll come back for him. She had said it not with hope, but with resolve. As if that puppy, Waffles, was the last promise she hadn't yet broken for her daughter. Ethan closed his eyes. This wasn't just about the dog. It wasn't even about layoffs anymore. It was about a mother who had given her daughter something to believe in, and a man who had unknowingly signed that belief away. And now, he had to find a way to give it back. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office before sunrise. The city still yawned under soft snow. As he stepped into the building's glass lobby, his reflection fractured in the chrome pillars. He didn't wait for coffee, didn't greet the receptionist. He walked straight to his office, sat down, and began digging. He needed answers, real ones. In his personal notebook, he scribbled the name Diana Hale. It was time to go deeper than summaries and sanitized termination reports. He called up her full personnel file. The more he read, the tighter the knot in his chest grew. 10 years of service, 0 formal complaints, 9 internal awards, 5 promotions, and dozens of glowing internal notes from clients and colleagues alike. One line caught him. Diana is the quiet backbone of this team. She carries more than we see. But in her final performance review, there was nothing human. Just graphs, metrics, a system glitch she was blamed for, no room for her track record, no appeals. Her departure had been swift, cold, efficient, just like the board had asked. Ethan sat back staring at the line that mattered most. Final signatory E. Brooks. His own signature. Black ink, no context. Just another click in a long week of decisions. How had he missed this? He remembered the operations meeting 3 weeks ago. Travis, his head of ops, had led it. He'd said there was an accountability gap in customer service and they needed to trim inefficiencies before Q1. Diana's name had been 3rd on the list. There had been no protest. No, are we sure? No room for questions. And Ethan had nodded, approved, moved on. But now, he saw the cost. He opened the email system and typed Diana's name. No recent messages. Nothing since her termination notice. But before that, over 40 client thank you emails in a 3-month span, personal ones, handwritten messages scanned and saved, compliments from major accounts. Diana checked in on me when my mother passed. I'll never forget that. If she's gone, I'm taking my business elsewhere. Why hadn't these surfaced during the decision? Because no one had asked, and no one had wanted to know. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he pulled up the security footage log. 2 weeks ago, Diana had returned to the building. She'd asked to pick up a box from her desk. No incident, no complaint. Just one line logged by the front desk attendant. Ms. Hale collected her belongings quietly. She was carrying a child's drawing and a dog toy. A dog toy. Waffles. It all connected. Diana hadn't just been let go. She had been erased. And now her daughter had tried to sell the only thing left that still felt like hope. Ethan stared at his screen, guilt and urgency rising like a storm inside him. He clicked through to an internal Slack archive and scrolled to the customer experience group channel. No one had even mentioned her name since. As if she had never existed. He leaned forward, typed into his notes. This is not leadership. This is erasure. He looked at the photo of Diana again, her smile, subtle eyes tired. A woman who had worked until the very end without raising her voice, carrying a child, a job, and a silent loyalty to a company that didn't look back. Until now, his phone buzzed. It was a calendar reminder. Executive budget review, 10 a.m. He canceled it. Instead, he pulled out his jacket, slipped it on, and gently lifted Waffles from his bed by the fire. It was time to find Lila again. But this time, he wouldn't be buying anything. He'd be returning something that never should have been taken in the first place, and preparing to face the person he'd failed. By Sunday afternoon, a light snow had begun to fall across the North Side strip mall, layering rooftops and dusting sidewalks like powdered sugar. Shoppers hurried in and out of the automatic doors, their boots squeaking on the slick tile, the air filled with distant carols from a scratchy speaker overhead. Ethan stepped out of his car, clutching Waffles in a carrier draped with a soft plaid blanket. In his other hand, a small bag of puppy food swung with each step. His eyes scanned the crowd, unsure if the girl would still be there. He didn't even know her last name yet. But then, there she was. Lila, standing near the grocery store entrance, a stack of pink papers in her gloved hands, now covered in smudged crayon drawings and shaky handwriting. She was handing them out one by one, her breath visible in soft puffs. The puppy sign was gone, but the determination in her eyes was the same. Ethan stood back for a moment, just watching. She looked up and froze. Waffles let out a soft whine from inside the carrier. Her eyes lit up. "You brought him back," she said, her voice part disbelief, part joy. Ethan smiled, knelt down and unzipped the carrier. Waffles wiggled out instantly and trotted toward her tail, wagging furiously. Lila scooped him up, hugging him like someone who'd been holding her breath for days. "He missed you," Ethan said gently. "He asked me to bring him home." Lila looked down at Waffles, then back up. Her voice was quiet. "You really gave him back?" "I'm not his owner," Ethan said. "You are. I was just the middleman." She blinked and without a word handed him one of the pink flyers she'd been holding. It read, "Please help my mom find work. She is very good and kind. Our family just needs a chance." Ethan studied it carefully. The handwriting was neat for a child. Some letters were backwards. At the bottom was a name written in bold black marker, Diana Hale, the same name he had stared at in his HR system for hours. He felt the breath leave his lungs. The circle was complete. "Your mom's name is Diana?" he asked, even though he already knew. Lila nodded, brushing snow from Waffles' ears. "She used to have a job, but they said she didn't do it right." "I don't think that's true. She helped people all the time." Ethan crouched down so they were eye level. "I believe you," he said quietly. Lila's eyes searched his as if trying to decide if she could trust him. She clutched Waffles closer. "Do you think my mom's broken?" she asked suddenly. The question hit him like a punch. He shook his head. "No, not even a little. I think she's stronger than most people I know." Lila seemed to relax slightly, then pointed toward the corner of the store. "She's resting inside. They let us use the break room for a little while. It's warmer there." Ethan hesitated. "Do you think she'd talk to me?" Lila tilted her head. "Maybe. If you bring Waffles." He smiled. "Deal." They walked together across the tile floor past the checkout lanes and into a narrow hallway behind the bakery. Lila knocked softly on a door marked Suite 4B. Inside, it was small. Just a few chairs, a folding table, and a mop bucket in the corner. Diana sat on a padded bench, her head resting against the wall, a thermos cradled in her hands. When she saw Lila and Waffles, she stood quickly. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Ethan behind them. He raised a hand, voice low. "I'm not here to upset anything. I just wanted to see you and to say thank you." She stared, arms crossed protectively. Ethan took a slow breath. "I didn't know who you were when I signed that report," he admitted. "But I know now, and I'm sorry." She didn't speak, not right away. He pulled the flyer from his coat pocket and held it up. "Your daughter made sure I remembered you." Finally, Diana let out a sigh, long and tired. "You still think sorry fixes things?" "No," Ethan said, "but showing up is a start. I'm not asking you to forget what happened, just to let me fix what I can." Waffles, sensing the tension, squirmed out of Lila's arms and curled up on Diana's lap. The mother's hand rested gently on his back. She looked down, then back up, her eyes softer now. "Okay," she said, "then start by listening." And for the first time, Ethan did. It had been nearly a week since that quiet conversation in the back of the grocery store. Ethan hadn't rushed. He hadn't sent flowers or checks or empty gestures. Instead, he did the one thing Diana had asked. He listened. He listened to the way her voice dipped when she talked about the night the system crashed and how she'd stayed past midnight trying to escalate the issue. But no one from tech support had answered. He listened when she explained how she'd emailed her supervisor 3 times that weekend and never got a response. And he listened most of all when she said this. No one ever asked what happened. They just needed someone to blame. Now standing outside the small walk-up apartment where Diana and Lila lived, Ethan found himself hesitating again. He had Waffles tucked under one arm and a thin leather notebook in the other, something he'd recovered from Diana's old desk just days earlier. The office manager had planned to toss it, calling it old junk, but Ethan had recognized Diana's handwriting on the cover. He took a breath and knocked. Lila answered first, Waffles wiggling in her arms. Her face lit up with a shy smile. "He missed you," she whispered. Ethan smiled back. "I missed him too." Then Diana appeared behind her daughter, her expression neutral, but not unkind. "You came," she said simply. "I did," Ethan replied, "and I brought something of yours." He handed her the notebook. Diana hesitated before taking it. Her fingers brushed the leather cover as if unsure it was real. She flipped it open slowly. Inside were handwritten thank you notes from the customers' messages scribbled in the ballpoint pen or printed in careful block letters. Some were simple, "Thanks for the help." Others more detailed. "You called me back when no one else did. That saved my business." Tucked among the notes were sticky tabs, reminders of follow-ups, even birthdays of repeat clients. One section was labeled calls that mattered. Diana blinked hard, then turned another page. Her own writing stared back at her. "You kept this?" she asked softly. "It was in your drawer," Ethan said. "I couldn't let it be thrown away." She sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the notebook open in her lap. Lila sat beside her, Waffles climbing into her arms again. Ethan remained standing, unsure of what came next. "I know I can't undo what happened," he said, "but I want to do better, starting with you." Diana looked up. "Why me?" He exhaled. "Because I should have seen what everyone else saw, and because leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about admitting when you were wrong and making it right." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Diana closed the notebook gently and looked him in the eye. "My daughter thought we lost everything," she said, voice tight. "Our home, my job, Waffles." "But she still smiled," Ethan said quietly. "She still believed in you. That says everything." Diana reached for Lila, pulling her close, then looked back at Ethan. "I'm not asking for my job back. I'm not even asking for an apology." Ethan nodded, understanding. "I'm asking," she continued, "that the next time you're in that boardroom, you remember this moment. And people like me." Ethan swallowed. "I will." She offered a faint nod, the edge of something warmer returning to her face. "And if there's a way to rebuild," he added carefully, "I'd like to be part of that. If you'll let me." Diana glanced at Lila, who was already halfway asleep, with Waffles snuggled into her hoodie. After a long pause, she said, "Then come back tomorrow, not to talk, to show me." Ethan's voice softened. I will. As he turned to leave, her voice followed him, just above a whisper. And bring the same honesty you brought tonight. The door clicked shut behind him. Ethan stood in the hallway, the leather notebook still imprinted in his memory, along with the weight of a mother's pride and a little girl's trust. This wasn't just about repairing a mistake. It was about becoming the kind of man who never made the same one again. The following Thursday morning, the receptionist at Ethan's office buzzed through with a voice both familiar and unexpected. Mr. Brooks, there's a young girl here. She says her name is Lila, and she brought a puppy. Ethan's pen froze mid-signature. His heart thumped once, then again, faster. He stood up. Send her in, he said, already walking toward the door. When it opened, Lila walked in proudly, her winter coat zipped to her chin, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. In her arms, Waffles wiggled like a ball of sunshine, wrapped in a tiny red scarf. Behind her, Diana stood just beyond the threshold, still uncertain. Ethan met her eyes and gave a small, respectful nod. Lila marched up to his desk all business. Waffles wanted to visit, she announced solemnly. He missed you, but also, I think he mostly wanted to say thank you. Ethan smiled, kneeling beside her. He's a very thoughtful dog. Lila nodded. We raised him right. Then she pulled something from her backpack, a small, slightly dented cardboard box wrapped in a pink ribbon. She placed it beside Waffles as if it were sacred. This is for you, she said. Mom didn't know I brought it, but I think you need to have it. Ethan looked up at Diana again. She had stepped partway into the room, now her arms crossed over her chest protectively. May I open it? He asked Lila. She nodded. Inside were a collection of photographs, black and white printouts, smiling faces, company picnics, customer appreciation events. In several, Diana stood laughing with coworkers, a hand gently on someone's shoulder, a plate of cookies in hand, a thank you card in the other. At the bottom of the box lay a folded envelope. Inside was a letter written in elegant looping cursive. Diana, thank you for staying with me after closing to help find my missing package. It meant more than you know. You made a hard day soft again. You didn't just do your job. You made me feel seen. Grateful always. M. Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered this customer, a single mom in tears on a delayed shipment. He hadn't known Diana was the one who fixed it. I found those in Mom's drawer, Lila said quietly. I thought maybe you forgot who she was, so I wanted to remind you. Ethan turned slowly toward Diana. She looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Her eyes shimmered, but she stood her ground. Leela, she whispered, embarrassed. But Ethan shook his head. She did the right thing. He sat down slowly, still holding the letter in both hands. The weight of it, more than any quarterly report, pressed into his chest. She kept every single one he said aloud, because they mattered. Lila nodded, and she thought she mattered too. Before, that last word landed like a stone. Before the termination, before the silence, before she had to look her daughter in the eyes and pretend things were fine. There was a silence none of them rushed to fill. Then Lila added gently, I think Waffles brought you to us, because my mom deserves to be loved again. Diana turned quickly away, brushing at her eyes. Ethan looked at her, not as a CEO, not as a man trying to make amends, but simply as someone who had finally begun to understand. She's right, he said softly. You're not broken. You never were. Diana exhaled slowly as if letting go of something heavy she'd carried too long. You still think words fix things? She asked, not unkindly. Ethan smiled faintly. No, but actions might. She watched him for a long moment. Then finally she said, I guess we'll see. The following Tuesday, the conference room on the 14th floor felt colder than usual, and not because of the air conditioning. Ethan stood at the head of the long glass table, hands braced on the polished surface. Around him sat 10 executives, some stone-faced, others impatiently flipping through the briefing packet he'd provided. On the screen behind him, a single name was displayed, Diana Hale. I'm proposing we bring her back, Ethan said, his voice firm, but even not to her old role, but to a new position, senior advisor for client experience. A low murmur rippled through the room. One of the older board members leaned forward, squinting. You mean the woman we let go last month? The one blamed for the back-end system failure? Ethan nodded. The same. A younger exec scoffed. We've never reversed a termination, Ethan. It sets a terrible precedent. Another chimed in, arms crossed. We made that decision based on facts. What's changed? Ethan pressed the remote. The screen flickered to life, showing customer feedback graphs, trend lines, and a noticeable drop in satisfaction beginning 2 weeks after Diana's departure. Customer experience ratings have fallen by over 11% since she left. Ethan said, "That's not a fluke. That's a red flag." He clicked again. Testimonials appeared, highlighted in bold. Diana stayed with me after hours. She helped me navigate a crisis no one else would touch. I trusted the company because I trusted her. These didn't make it into her termination packet, Ethan continued, because no one looked for them, and I didn't ask the right questions. The boardroom was silent. One executive shifted uncomfortably. "You sound like this is personal." Ethan looked at him directly. "It is." That caught them off guard. Because I was the one who signed her termination without context, without review. I rubber-stamped a decision to get through the week. That was my mistake, and if we don't fix it, it becomes our failure. The tension in the room rose. We can't just start rehiring people because we feel bad. A woman from HR argued, "It undermines every manager we have." Ethan nodded. "I'm not asking you to fund this. I'll cover her salary and training personally, from the CEO discretionary budget." Now they stared at him. "I'm not doing this because I feel guilty," Ethan added. "I'm doing it because Diana Hale was never the problem. She was the glue. And our clients noticed when she disappeared." A pause. "Leadership," he said quietly, "is not about avoiding mistakes. It's about correcting them before they define us." Silence blanketed the room like snow. Then finally the company's general counsel raised her eyes from her notes. "What if it works?" she asked softly. Ethan let a small smile touch his lips. "Then we all win." There were no applause, no handshakes, just a quiet shift in the room's energy, as if something unspoken had been acknowledged, something long overdue. 3 days later, Diana Hale received a letter she never expected. Not just an offer to return, but an invitation to lead. The soft click of her new office door closing behind her felt surreal. Diana stood in the quiet space, her fingers trailing the edge of her new desk. It wasn't large or flashy, just a modest workspace with clean lines, a small window overlooking the street below, and a nameplate Ethan had custom ordered himself. Diana Hale, Senior Advisor for Client Experience. And below it in smaller font, Voice of the Customer. She exhaled slowly. It had been 3 weeks since the day her daughter handed Ethan that box. 3 weeks since the man who had once signed away her job chose to sign her name again. This time, as a leader. The air in the building felt different now. There were no sideways glances, no awkward silences. The few colleagues she passed on her way in offered genuine if surprised smiles. Ethan visited her office that afternoon, not as her boss, not with a clipboard, but with 2 cups of coffee and a quiet question. "You doing okay today?" It was such a simple phrase, but after everything it nearly broke her. They began working together closely. Ethan made space for her ideas, her insights, her voice. Together they combed through old policy manuals, highlighting what needed changing and what had failed people like her. They revised termination protocols, added protections for single parents, wrote guidelines for emotional support during layoffs. They didn't just fix what had been broken, they built something new. "Why are you so careful with this?" Ethan asked one evening as they worked late, empty takeout containers between them. Diana set down her pen, her eyes steady. "Because I know what it's like to cry alone at your kitchen table and wonder how to explain hunger to a child without using the word poor." Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was listening, not avoidance. Every Thursday they shared lunch. Diana brought leftovers from home, Lila's favorites. Ethan, once a man who ate cold sandwiches between back-to-back meetings, now looked forward to warm casseroles and spiced lentil soup. One afternoon, Diana forgot her tote bag in the break room. Ethan found it later sitting on the table. He meant only to return it, but a small weathered notebook stuck out of the top, the same one he'd given her weeks earlier. Curious, he opened it for a second. Inside were more customer notes. Some dated back nearly a decade. Scribbled drawings, emails printed out and folded like origami cards with dog-eared corners. One line read, "You treated me like a person, not a problem. That saved my day." He closed it quickly, placed it back where it belonged. Later that week, he saw her struggling with a squeaky chair. She tried to ignore it, but the sound was impossible to miss. "Let me take a look," he offered. Before she could object, Ethan knelt beside the chair, examining the wheels and armrest. "Summer job in college," he said with a grin. "My dad taught me how to fix stuff. Wood, furniture, small engines. Said every CEO should know how to build a chair before sitting in a boardroom." Diana laughed for the first time in weeks. The chair never squeaked again. Something unspoken began to bloom between them. Trust, yes, but also something warmer, something that surprised them both. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was respect, earned, grown, watered with honesty and humility. Ethan had once cut Diana's name from a spreadsheet. Now he was building policy around her voice. And slowly, between revised memos, shared meals, and quiet glances over stacks of reports, he began to believe that second chances weren't just possible. They were worth fighting for. The office buzzed with soft chatter and the rustle of folding chairs. It was Inspiration Day, a new company tradition born out of the reforms Diana and Ethan had created together. The idea was simple. Employees could bring someone who inspired them to work and share a story about why. Family, friends, mentors, whoever had left an imprint on their heart. Diana had hesitated when Ethan first suggested it. "Bring Lila," he'd said almost casually. "Let people see who helped bring you back." She had smiled, but uncertainly. "You think she'll be okay standing in front of all those people?" Ethan had nodded. "I've seen her in the cold trying to sell the one thing she loved most. She'll be fine." Now here they were. Lila walked nervously to the front of the room, her small boots clicking softly against the linoleum. Her hair was tied back with a pink ribbon, and Waffles trotted beside her proudly in a tiny red bandana. She clutched a crayon drawing of her family, herself, her mom Waffles, and a stick figure version of Ethan with cartoonishly tall hair. Standing on tiptoe, she faced the gathered employees. "My name is Lila," she said, voice small but clear, "and my mom is my hero." The room went quiet. She didn't stop being nice, even when people were mean. She smiled at me, even when we had to sell waffles. She said we were still lucky, because we had each other. Diana sat in the front row, frozen tears brimming behind her eyes. Lila continued glancing at Ethan, and then back to her mom. And Waffles came back. And then Mom started smiling again. She paused, then added with surprising maturity, "I don't know if puppies have magic, but ever since Mr. Ethan showed up, Mom and I laugh more. So, maybe they do." The silence in the room cracked not with applause, but with something deeper. Emotion, unspoken truths, and the recognition that a company is not just numbers and policies, but people. Finally the applause came, slow, then stronger, then steady. Ethan blinked fast, willing the sting in his eyes to stay put. Diana pulled Lila into her lap the moment she returned to her seat. She held her close, kissing the top of her head. Waffles curled up under her chair like he belonged there all along. After the event, as people trickled back to their offices, Ethan approached Diana. She was still sitting in the corner, arms around Lila, the crayon drawing folded neatly in her hands. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, laughing softly through her tears. "I didn't think I'd cry today." "Neither did I," he said, smiling. "She's amazing." "She's seen a lot," Diana replied, "but she still believes in good things." He paused, then said carefully, "She's not the only one." That night, Diana tucked Lila into bed and stood by the window for a long time, the city lights stretching into the distance. She thought about the way Ethan had looked at her, not with guilt or regret anymore, but with something else. Hope. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that builds. It was a cool Saturday evening when Diana, Ethan, and Lila found themselves walking through Lincoln Park, just as the sun began its slow descent behind the city skyline. Waffles scampered ahead of them, chasing leaves and stopping every few feet to look back, as if making sure his little family was still following. The air smelled like early fall, crisp with hints of wood smoke and distant laughter from a birthday party nearby. Lila skipped between them, one hand in her mom's, the other, swinging freely. Her cheeks glowed in the amber light. Her laughter was lighter now, effortless. Diana watched her and smiled, genuinely, freely, like someone who had stopped bracing for the worst. "Waffles has a baby brother now," Lila announced. "We're keeping him, unless we need to sell him to fix more people." Diana laughed, her eyes flicking toward Ethan. She still thinks puppy sales fix broken adults. Ethan grinned. In my case, she wasn't wrong. They paused under a street lamp, its warm glow casting soft shadows around them. A few leaves floated down, twirling gently toward the path. Ethan turned toward Diana, his voice quiet. I may not know a lot about dogs, he said, but I know when I chose to keep Waffles that day, I found more than a puppy. Diana glanced at him, her expression unreadable. He continued his words steady. I found a reason to pay attention again, to lead better, and to not keep my heart locked behind a desk. Diana's breath caught. She wasn't ready for confessions, but she wasn't afraid of them anymore either. At the steps to her apartment, she turned to unlock the door. Ethan hesitated behind her. I don't know if I'm someone Lila can rely on, he admitted. But I want to be, if you'll let me. She turned keys in hand, eyes searching his. I'm scared, she said softly. She's already attached to you. If this falls apart, I understand, he said. I'm not asking for blind trust. Just a chance. A long moment passed. Then Diana stepped aside, opening the door. Come in, she said. You're already here. Inside, the light was warm and the space cozy, filled with mismatched furniture and the faint scent of cinnamon. Later that evening, as Lila showed Ethan her new drawing of Waffles, saving the CEO from evil spreadsheets, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He handed it to Diana. She opened it to find a delicate silver bracelet, old but polished, engraved on the inside, with one word: courage. It was my mother's, Ethan said. She used to tell me, if someone makes you want to be better, don't let them go. You and Lila, you reminded me how to care again. Diana held the bracelet gently. You keep surprising me. Ethan crouched beside Waffles, clipping a new tag to the dog's collar. Diana leaned in to read it. One word: belong. He looked up at her eyes, clear. It's what you've always deserved. You just forgot for a while. The next day, they drove to a meadow just outside the city. Quiet, open, full of wildflowers. Lila ran through the tall grass, Waffles bounding after her. Diana stood beside Ethan, watching her daughter laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in what felt like years. She hasn't smiled like that in a long time, she whispered. Ethan reached for her hand. We're building something that lasts. Lila ran back to them, hair wild from the wind, cheeks flushed. She leaned into Ethan's side. This time, she said softly, Mommy doesn't lose her job again, right? Ethan kissed the top of her head. Not this time, sweetheart. Not ever again. As the sun dipped lower, casting the field in gold, Ethan looked at Diana. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but with hope. Sometimes a story begins with a whisper, a voice so small, so soft, you almost don't hear it. Please buy our puppy. But what if you did? What if instead of brushing it off as a passing moment, you stopped and listened? That's what Ethan Brooks did. Not because he was a hero, but because something in that little girl's voice cracked open a door he hadn't realized was closed. Behind it, a woman who had been overlooked, a child trying to hold her world together with cardboard and crayons, and a tiny puppy named Waffles, who somehow knew where he belonged before anyone else did. This story wasn't about a job, or a policy, or a performance review. It was about redemption, about the courage it takes to face your mistakes, not with excuses, but with open hands and open eyes. About second chances, not just being given, but being earned. Diana didn't need rescuing. She needed to be seen. And Ethan didn't need saving. He needed to remember who he was. Together, they created something rare, a workplace built on empathy, a family built on trust, and a future where belonging wasn't earned. It was recognized. So if you've ever made a mistake or been written off or felt invisible, this story is for you. Because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and all it takes to change everything is the courage to listen,